The uniform said bellhop, and the sprinkle of freckles plus barn cowlick said all-American boy. But the shifty eyes and the narrow mouth that slid over to the side of his face when he talked said something else, like racetrack tout.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to an ear-gasmic edition of the U.S. Racing Show. I am your friendly host, Derek Simon, and this is the show where we talk about everything and anything related to the sport of kings and sports gambling. And what a great show today, because I've got champion Hall of Fame jockey Mike Smith on the program. We're going to talk about his Kentucky Derby mount, just kind of look back at some of his memories of racing. He's been active since he was 11 years old as a rider. Of course, he's also the regular rider of Songbird. We'll talk about that horse, who, by the way, has spiked to fever. Most people know this by now, and will not compete in the Kentucky Oaks, which has paved the way for Catherine Sophia, who apparently had distance problems but now doesn't, to consider a run in the Oaks as well. Also, Kevin Rogers is here. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA playoffs, but before we get to all of that, there are a few things you need to know.
I'm looking forward to completing your training. In time, you will call me Master.
Alrighty then. I learned it from a book.
I find this scientifically fascinating.
You're gonna remember this the rest of your life. Oh, I already knew that.
I don't get it.
What part didn't you understand?
Will you never learn?
Help you, I can. Yes.
The last of the two Kentucky Derby preps were run last Saturday. I say two. The Lexington probably won't produce a Kentucky Derby starter, but there was the Arkansas Derby that ran as well, and it was a very interesting race.
They're into the stretch now of the Arkansas Derby, and the leader is still Gettysburg. 3/4, 1:10-3. Gettysburg has the lead. Creator will not get the job done. On the outside, here's Whitmore coming on. Big Changes is next, and Creator is flying. Creator now strikes to the lead. Down the outside, Sudden Breaking News is coming late. Creator of Sudden Breaking News. Creator's almost there. It's Ricardo Santana Jr. It's Creator to win the Arkansas Derby. Second, Sudden Breaking News. Third is Whitmore. Fourth is Dazzling Gem in 150 flat.
It's been a couple of weeks with snafus by the racing announcers. Peter Aiello, and it tells you how seriously these guys take their job. He was very disappointed that he accidentally said Creator will not get the job done. Of course, he meant Cupid, the favorite in the Arkansas Derby, would not get the job done. And he took to social media to, talk a little bit about that. It's, to me, one of those things that happens. Cupid, Creator, I could just imagine how I would botch up these calls. But once again, it shows just how much these guys take their job seriously. You'll remember Larry Colmus in the Wood Memorial called the wrong horse on the rail, and he was just, mortified, devastated by that. But as far as the Arkansas Derby goes, it was won by Creator. It was a very interesting race. The one thing about the Arkansas Derby, and one of the reasons why I think it's become such a big prep for the Kentucky Derby, is that it simulates the Kentucky Derby very, very well. The early speed ration, that, of course, my own measurement of early energy disbursement, a -12. Of course, the lower the better. The Derby par is about a -9 or -10. So the Arkansas Derby actually 3 lengths faster than that. Creator, however, came from dead last, and I don't like that. There was a debate on social media about the pace in the Derby and what is the pace going to look like, and people talking about whether it's a front runner or closer, and folks always point out the fact, well, there's a lot of closers that win the Derby. The last horse to go wire to wire was War Emblem, and that was many years ago. So we got to look for a closer, right? Well, yes and no. Yeah, a lot of closers win, but not a lot of confirmed closers win, meaning that a lot of horses going into the Derby with that one-dimensional running style do not do well. It's the horses that can adapt a little bit. Another thing that's interesting is the turn time aspect. I've written about this before. In fact, I dug out an old article, and I came up with a turn time ratio very similar to my early speed ration and my late speed ration. And without getting into how I went about deriving this rating, Suffice it to say that since 1975, nearly half of the Kentucky Derby winners raced in a final prep with an excellent turn time ratio. 35 of 40 came out of a race with an average turn time ratio, and only 2 exited a race with a poor turn time ratio. Of course, I know what a lot of folks are thinking. Well, Derek, what are the turn time rations or ratios for this year? Well, amongst the excellent set or good set, there are a couple. You've got the Tampa Bay Derby. Surprisingly, the UAE Derby. And that was a huge shock to me because the UAE Derby, typically not a great prep. Now, the ESR in the UAE Derby is always a problem because it's always slow. But Lanny, the winner of the UAE Derby, the turn time ration in that race, very, very good. Now, there's only one poor one, and this is among the last preps for horses. The only poor one is the Spiral Stakes. That was won by Oscar nominated. This was poor on many levels. The Equibase speed figure, one of the lowest, a 98. The Brisnet speed figure, a 91. It was graded a D on my prep grading scale. Now, that doesn't necessarily matter. It's really only the failing grades that matter. And depending on how you view the UAE Derby, it's a graded race. So because of that, it would not get a failing grade. The points, and I don't want to get into how I do the points on that either, because it would just be time-consuming and, frankly, quite boring. But generally, the points have to be lower. The points were okay as far as the UAE Derby goes. And by the way, I wrote about this a long time ago, how I go about grading these races. So it's out there on the internet. And we'll talk more about it as we get closer to the Kentucky Derby. But if you view that as an ungraded race, which frankly I think it probably should be, then it wouldn't be a great prep. As it stands, there's really nothing in terms of the prep grades, at least the way I grade them, that would disqualify any one race. From a pace figure standpoint, it's very interesting. The other thing I noticed this year that's unique is the late speed rations. That's my measurement of late energy disbursement, are on the weak side. Last year, American Pharoah came out of the Arkansas Derby, and that had a -10 ESR pace, so right on that Derby par. And once again, why I think that's important is horses are creatures of habit. And if they're used to a certain scenario, in fact, I'm going to write an article very soon, I'm currently writing it, for U.S. Racing, which talks about changes being bad. You don't want to make changes going into the Kentucky Derby. Everything needs to go as planned. So when you have these kinds of late changes, it's not good. You want horses to be used to what they're dealing with. Because think about it, on Kentucky Derby Day, you've got a massive crowd. You've got a distance these horses have never tried. You've got a field that these horses have never faced in terms of just the sheer size of it. There's bumping, there's jostling. There's a bunch of stuff that they're going to have to face for the first time anyway. So you don't want to add to that. So having faced the Derby pace is very, very important. American Pharoah did that. In fact, he rated off the pace, which was incredibly important in my mind. It shows why Bob Baffert is such a great trainer. Todd Pletcher did this with Super Saver when he won his one and only Derby. In the Arkansas Derby of 2015, American Pharoah -8 late speed ration. The Arkansas Derby this year, a -12. That's about 4 lengths slower, and you had a horse coming from far off the pace. You look at the Wood Memorial, a -13 LSR for the winner. Santa Anita Derby, a -13. So it just kind of shows you the difference between last year and this year, at least as it relates to the Derby winner. Now, I mentioned the Lexington Stakes. That was also run on Saturday, and it went a little something like this.
To the top of the short stretch, Collected once again, coming after one more round, a gap of 6. Direct Message third, Swipe is in fourth, Riker fifth, Synchrony sixth. Collected, coming past the 8th pole, has wrestled the lead away from one more round. A margin of 7 more lengths then, back to Direct Message. Synchrony moves up third toward the inside, but well behind Collected. Javier Castellano rallies Collected past the leader in the stretch to win the Lexington Stakes.
Now, that was an impressive effort by Collected, but here again I want to look at the pace figures. A -6 ESR. So a pace about 4 lengths slower than what Collected will face in the Derby. Collected was close to that pace. So for him to be close to the pace or in the same position in the Derby, and mind you, this is important in terms of the psyche of some horses. They like to be running in a certain position, a certain place in the pack. For Collected to do that in the Derby, he's going to have to run a whole lot faster. Or he's going to have to adapt and come from off the pace. Now, horses do this all the time. So I don't want to make too much of this. But my point is always that if you're asking a horse to do something that it hasn't done, you must insist on a price. That's why I'm not going to take a short price on a horse. And not that Collected is going to be a short price, but I wouldn't take a short price on a horse like that. You've got to get paid if you're asking them to do something they've never done before. Now, before my voice gives out completely, I want to take a quick break and come back with Mike Smith and then finish out with Kevin Rogers. Looking for some action? Well, if it's sports and casino action you're after, USRacing.com has got you covered. At USRacing.com, you can get the latest betting lines on pro and college football, basketball, and all the MLB and NHL action, too. Heck, you can even get the latest odds on the presidential race, the Academy Awards, or who's going to be the next James Bond. Clue, it's probably not going to be P. Diddy, but he's on the list of betting options. And if you're a racing fan like me, you'll love the daily menu and special prop bets. Thoroughbred racing, check. International racing, check. Greyhound racing, check. Harness racing, check. Generous rebates, checkmate. USRacing.com also has a wide variety of casino games as well. So if you're looking for some sports and casino action, look no further than USRacing.com, the place that's setting the pace.
Now, back to your host. While he's still sober, here's Derek.
I'm now thrilled to be talking to a guy that I think represents the Sport of Kings so well. Mike Smith, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Mike, I was reading up on you. Obviously, I've followed your career, and it's just been, like I said, I truly think you've just been such a great ambassador for the sport. But you started riding at 11 years old. Tell me what got you interested in horse racing?
Well, I was very fortunate that my grandparents, who I was living with at the time, both my grandparents actually owned race horses and was into the business somewhat. And my uncle, one of my mom's older brothers, was a trainer, also a good rider himself. And I always, to be honest with you, I wanted to be a linebacker, but I didn't grow much bigger than the football. So, so I was always pretty athletic and just, wanted always to compete, and racing was my next step. And not to mention my love for horses is just incredible. I've had a horse since I can walk. So as you can imagine, I learned how to ride a horse before I learned how to walk, to tell you the truth.
I got to bring that up, the athleticism, because back in 2012, you were featured in ESPN's magazine, Bodies We Want. I understand, I think you're about my age, 49 now. People don't know this, but as we're doing the interview, you're on your bike. I tell you, if I was doing that, it would sound like I'm dying. Tell me, where did the push to be so fit? Because, I feel little aches and pains all the time. I cannot imagine, Mike, getting on a horse and riding. I know Gary Stevens is one of your friends, and I would say the same thing about Gary. How in the world do you guys do this at your age?
Man, I'm just really, really fortunate at a younger age to get into fitness and health, and probably thanks to the Fitin Kai. I think everyone looked up to him so much, and he was so fit and into health, into being healthy, into keeping your weight down the right way and doing everything as healthy as possible. And I just started at a young age doing it, and blessed that I really enjoy it. It's something I made it's a way of life now. I can't. It's my everyday routine. If I don't do it, I don't feel whole. So I just have to keep working out.
I've kind of sacrificed some flexibility for muscle gains. And the other day at the gym, I'm trying to roll up the sleeves of my shirt. I just done a chest workout. Could not reach the other side of my shirt. It looked like such a tool having to ask somebody to help me. You obviously cannot do that. You have to stay flexible. You have to be able to, adapt to the horse. How do you go about that in your workout routine? And does the biking, does the cardio, is all that part of that?
Well, the bike, as far as the bike goes, it's just part of my cardio. I've learned that if I ride the bike down to my favorite place for lunch and have a little light lunch and ride my bike back, I've actually lost a pound eating lunch. To be honest with you, and then I just use it for my cardio. Getting close to 50 years old now. I still run, but I can't run as much as I used to. My knees start bothering me, so I picked up the bike, and man, I just really enjoy it. And as far as weight training, man, I have two wonderful trainers that train with me. For about anywhere from 12 to 15 years now. They've been with me, and they just know my body so good. We do all kinds of sorts of different things. A lot of interval training. Some strength training at times. We just switch it up all the time. Whatever's the latest and new thing that's coming out, we try that as well. So just really into staying fit and healthy. And I think at my age right now, it's what's keeping me able to compete with these younger kids because, man, we got some young, talented, tough riders right now.
Absolutely. Hey, I just heard this morning that Songbird has got a fever, will not be in the Kentucky Oaks. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about her anyway, but that's one of the things about racing that I think is really, really tough is you get on a horse like Songbird, you get on a great horse, and then these things come up. How do you deal with those kinds of disappointments?
Well, I've been blessed. I've been in this game for so long, and you learn that at this stage, as long as she's healthy, and then, that's the main concern. And what she is, she's going to be fine. God forbid it was something else or it was career-ending, or even worse. So, although it's a big disappointment not to compete in the Oaks this year because I would have certainly thought, and I don't think anybody will argue with me, that she would have certainly been the overwhelming favorite. And, of course, you never know until you run the race, but if things would have gone the way they've been going anyway, you could certainly see her in the winner's circle big time. So that part's disappointing, but what I'm happy about is that she's fine. I went to see her this morning, fed her carrots, her temperature's back down, man. She seemed happy. It seemed like you could let her out of the stall this morning and run her if you wanted to, so that's a good sign. She took to the antibiotics real good, and she's doing well.
You got a mythical field, mile and an eighth. You've got a Ziri, Start and Bound, Zenyatta, Royal Delta, Sky Beauty, Songbird, Heavenly Prize, Inside Information. These are all fillies that you rode, which is just incredible because this is a Hall of Fame list here. Who wins that race? Who's second? Who's third?
Oh, man, there's so many variables that could happen. It depends how fast who went on the lead, what the pace was like. Was it raining? Was it not raining? It's just so much. I couldn't pick a winner. I love all those fillies so much. That'd be like picking a favorite child. It's just impossible.
I know. That's why it's such an unfair question for me to ask, but I thought I would try
really
anyway.
Is. But, honestly, at their time and their moment, no one was better than them, each and every one of them, So I can't take two totally different moments and put them together. It's just impossible to do, I just you saying those names just gave me goosebumps, man. I've been very blessed.
Hey, I was talking to some friends of mine about, preparation and how athletes prepare for things, and I get a kick out of it in the gym. You get some of these guys, you get all angry, and it's especially funny then when they don't make the weight they're trying for. But how do you get ready for these big races? The Kentucky Derby, most of us watching, I know I get a pit in my stomach probably 45 minutes before post time. How do you prepare for this? Is there a ritual that you go through, whether it's a Breeders' Cup race, a Kentucky Derby, a Kentucky Oaks, anything that you do that kind of, calms the nerves and gets you ready to ride?
Yeah, I train for it. I train for each and every situation like a horse would going into the race. And you can ask my trainers as it gets closer, man, I just get real quiet. And I get real quiet, real focused. I've already ran every scenario that could be possibly run in my head 1,000 times, so that part's already gone. And now the part is just keeping myself feeling good, ready to go out and compete, just focus and react to every situation that happens because you well know, you have a game plan, but when the door's open, 100 different things can happen, and you gotta be a quick thinker, but yet, for me anyway, I like to be able to slow things down a bit and just really focus and slow things down and just react to every situation that comes up and getting the horse into a nice, comfortable rhythm. And I know that if you get any horse, period, into a nice, comfortable rhythm, when you call on them, they're going to be there. So that's really the game plan. And the rest, as far as the traffic goes, it's just reading jockeys that and body language and horse language and who you think's going to move it where, or who's going to go there. And, that part you can't tell until you're actually there, so there's no use in worrying about it.
I've made the point in the past that when horses get a comfortable trip, that's generally when they run the fastest. A lot of people think that, like in the case of Songbird, that if a horse is held back and not really asked for much, they can, win by 40 lengths or, get these crazy, comparisons to Secretariat and whatever. A horse that you rode recently that might be in the Derby, and that's Danzing Candy. That horse went out very, very fast in the Santa Anita Derby. I'm thinking that's not what you wanted to do. How tough is it to control a horse when they just want to do something that you don't want them to do?
Well, sometimes the worst thing you can do is actually strangle one. Sometimes you're better off just going with that energy that they have, and hope that at some point somewhere, even they'll catch a breather. They'll kind of realize, okay, I need to slow down here just a little bit and take a breath of air. And, you'll be able to carry him on home the last part. But in his situation, no, it wasn't what we wanted to do. Every time I've ever ridden him, I've been able to be really aggressive, leaving there on him, and then put my hands down, and he shuts off like a light. Like he just turns off in my hands. So nice and so easy. For whatever reason, the other day, he didn't do that. I was a little aggressive with him leaving there, and when I went to put my hands down to shut him down, man, he just flat took off. I think a lot of that was going into the race. He was probably a bit sharper than we normally go into the race as. And another thing was it was really sloppy. He's never been on a sloppy track before. And a lot of times when that mud hits the horse in the belly, I mean, it's just a different feeling. Sometimes it'll make one run off. It's a lot louder. It's noisier because of the mud. Especially when it's sealed, it just makes a lot of noise when they're hoofs down on the racetrack. So I just think a combination of everything just kind of got him riled up, and he didn't relax as near as well as I'd like him to have. And then I found that whenever I did ease in his head to pick it up, when he felt like he was on roller skates on that slippery track. He just didn't handle it well. So we're going into the Derby. I'm riding him in the Derby. I think he's the kind of horse that, as quick as he is, he'll probably be forwardly placed if all goes well. Even there, he'll be in front, and it's just a matter of getting him into a nice, comfortable rhythm again. And I think, how far he'll go, we don't know. But I know one thing, that if I do that, I'll be headed for home with a chance. I know that.
Mike, do you think he can come off the pace? You obviously got some good news with Cupid being out of the race. And, a lot of people talking about how fast the pace is going to be in the Derby. I've seen this, I'm sure you've seen this in years past, where exactly what people don't expect is what happens. So the fast pace, like when War Admiral ran, I remember, a lot of people, War Emblem ran. A lot of people talking about how fast the pace was going to be. It really wasn't. Do you think if it is fast, can Danzing Candy come off the pace?
I think it's someone that, given the opportunity, I was drawn inside the speed. I mean, if I was drawn outside of it, I certainly think he could. We do it with him in the mornings. In saying that, again, like I said, the mile and a quarter is still definitely a question. And I believe going into the race right now, from what I've seen going in there, I mean, if it was to run the way you ran it off paper, now that doesn't mean it will, but if that was to happen, I would certainly think he would be the speed. So if he jumped away well, he would definitely be the controlling speed. It's just a matter if I'm able to get him to go that far or not. He's a very talented horse. He's already proven that, he beat Exaggerator and More Spirit and horses like that going a mile and 16th. Now, can he do it going a mile and a quarter is a different story, so we just have to wait and see. Now, is there an indication of his last race that he didn't? If you look at his last race, you'd probably lean towards the side that he couldn't get the mile and a quarter. But in saying that, nothing went as normal with him that day that it normally does. So he's so talented, I have to give him another shot.
I'm always interested in the behind-the-scenes stuff, and in the Kentucky Derby, we know because of the 20 horses that a lot goes on that would probably get you taken down in another race. I'm not asking you to name any names, but do you ever leave a big race like that and just, I remember when Calvin Burrell was furious at Castellano one year. Do you ever find those situations where you see certain guys and, you're like, man, I don't want to be anywhere near this guy?
Well, I handicap riders as I do horses, to be honest with you. So I know who maybe plays it a little on the rougher side, who'll gamble a little bit, who'll do a little this, a little that. I know who's in front of me, so a lot of times I'll take that into consideration and add that to my handicapping and add it to what move I'm going to make, or if I'm going to make it on the inside if that guy's on the outside of me, or if I'm going to wait, let him drop over and shut someone else off because I know he's going to, and then I'll come to the outside of him. So the stuff like that happens so quick, though, man. I mean, it's just a thought that just pops in your head. I mean, you don't. Something you just have to react to when you're at that moment.
I've often lamented as a handicapper that the pace anymore can be so difficult to call because so many riders just relax immediately. I don't think there are a lot of guys with a clock in their head anymore. Man, you are fantastic on front runners. You've shown it with Songbird. You've taken horses that nobody thought would be on the lead. You put them on the lead and they win. How do you do that? You mentioned handicapping. Are there a lot of guys that are doing the same thing, or is that kind of a forgotten art? I remember Jerry Bailey used to be big into that too.
I mean, I seem to have a knack for it for whatever reason. You know, it's all about knowing what your horse is capable of, and going back to that part where just getting them comfortable and getting the horse happy into a rhythm that they're comfortable with. And when you really learn a horse, and you know when they're comfortable, when they're not. I mean, that's just a huge plus. I mean, whenever I can get a horse into a rhythm that I know he's capable of and can carry this rhythm for a ways, and if you get away with a little something on top of that, then you can maybe get a little brave and move a little earlier. Or, there's all different kind of things you can do. But you know, it wasn't a few years back when people were saying I was great from coming from last because I was riding Zenyatta. You know, now I'm riding Songbird. She goes to the lead. Now I think I'm great on the lead, so I'm not really sure if it's me or the horse.
Hey, man, speaking...
I think I'd lean towards the side of the horse.
Speaking of Zenyatta, I thought that was one of the greatest press conferences I've ever seen after she lost the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I felt you took a lot of personal responsibility. You know, a lot of people take responsibility, but they don't really. You know, like there's that song out there, blame it on me, but don't blame it on me. You literally did. I don't think it was your fault that she lost that race, but obviously that affected you. You know, you obviously get attached to a lot of these horses. Is that something that you have to kind of work at, not taking it so personal when these horses lose, or you think that you're responsible?
You know, I'm a competitor, man, and if I feel that there was something that I could have done different, I know one thing, that if I had to do it all over again, everyone says, "Oh, you do the same thing, wouldn't you?" No, then the outcome would be the same. I would have done something different. What that is, I'm really not sure. But I'm certainly not going to do the same thing I did last time because that didn't work, you know. So, you know, and I had a love for her that was just special. It was really, really deep. Still is. You know, I might not have showed it a whole lot, but it was in there, and I think it all kind of came out that day because I knew that was the last time. I guarantee I probably wouldn't have been so hard on myself. I will say this, and if I knew she was running again, I probably wouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. But since that was the last time I was ever going to sit on her back, even talking to you right now, I get emotional about it.
Let's get away from a failure, if you will. Talk about one of your biggest victories. Yeah, exactly. Let's not dwell on that, Mike. Let's talk about Giacomo. That was a horse I actually liked. I didn't even know, I couldn't pronounce the horse's name. I thought it was Giacomo, so I didn't even know when he was being called. But man, what a ride that was. And I believe that was your first Kentucky Derby, too. What was that like, winning on a horse, a long shot, and in the manner that you won?
Anyone would tell you, I mean, most people in the sport anyway will say that their number one dream was, of course, to always win the Kentucky Derby. I mean, I think that's what we're all in it for. So to finally get that done was just incredible. But then to win it on a horse like Giacomo even was a little more special because he was by Holy Bull, who a horse that I rode in the Derby that was a huge favorite. That on any other day, besides for whatever reason that day, he would have beat that field pretty handy. I mean, he'd already beat every horse in the race by double digits, but for whatever reason that day he just didn't. So, I mean, putting all that together and the trip that I had, I mean, it seemed like every door open as I wanted it to. You know, it just each and every place that I got to, I needed something to happen, and something would just happen for me. It was, I don't know, it's probably one of my finest rides ever. I would have to say, and you know, although you know he didn't go on to do a whole lot, but he did everything I ever dreamed of in that one race, so that was good enough for me. You know.
That's the way I look at it. You win the Derby, it doesn't matter if they go on to do anything else. That is the dream. And yeah, Holy Bull, you're right, 13-16, and yet broke poorly in that Derby and just wasn't to be. How long do you plan on riding? You know, you're 49 now. You're still riding in great form. Do you have that clock in your head thinking, hey, I think I'll hang it up?
I think of it more now, more because people think of it for me, to be honest with you, more than I actually do.
I'm sorry, man.
So, and they, no, I'm not just natural. I mean, 50 years old, it's just, I mean, I'm going to have to at some point. I certainly hope when I do that I can walk away from this sport, you know, and hold my head up high and leave here healthy and proud of what I've done, and hopefully continue to be a part of this sport in some way. Right now, I take a lot of these young kids to the gym with me a lot of times, and I'm still hanging with them.
Absolutely, I know.
So, man, I'm still there, but I guess one of these days when I take them over there, or if I'm alongside of one of them winning a race, and I feel, I think I'll know. I just can't compete, physically anymore with these guys. And when that happens, I'm so competitive that if I felt that I harmed or was in any way a hindrance to the horse and to the owners and the trainers and all the time that people put in these animals, I certainly ain't going to be that guy. So whenever I feel that has happened, then I think I'll call it a career. When that'll be, I don't know. I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't happen for another good 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 years.
Sounds good to me. All right, we've reached that point, Mike. It is the random question segment.
That's so random.
You want answers?
What'd you say?
Right.
Funny how?
Lucy, why don't you answer me?
You're not a eunuch, are you?
What do you all know about that?
Do you have any marijuana I might be able to buy from you?
Is it true that you're in the middle of a nervous breakdown?
Who said that?
Why do you say you feel trapped in a man's body?
All right, these are random questions off the internet. Some of them make sense. Some of them make no sense whatsoever. First one's pretty basic. What is your favorite food?
Steak.
Very good. That sounds good to me. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Grease.
Grease, really? All right. Get along with my wife. Biggest mistake?
Olivia Newton-John, she did it for me back in the day.
I hear you. Biggest mistake in life?
Biggest mistake in life? I would have to say, I'm ashamed to say it, but I'd have to say a DUI.
Uh-huh. Well, like I said, once again, I appreciate your honesty. Last one, and this one's pretty light, too. What was your favorite childhood video game? And probably you and I can relate to these, Mike. A lot of these kids will have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, as we were talking earlier, I started riding at such a young age that I didn't get a chance to play, Pac-Man and all them kind of games. I think Galaxy was the one game that I was actually good at.
Now, here's why you can win.
Every time you lose, you die a little bit. You die inside, a portion of you. Not all of your organs, maybe just your liver.
In our business, there is no second place. Either you're first or you're last.
Sick. So sick.
You walk in that door on your 2 legs, all fat and cocky.
You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
See that? That's your IQ, buddy. 0.
If you look at this play, what we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here, and trying to run this play in the alley.
Remember, we do everything in reps. So we've done 2 reps of water drinking. Usually we do 10 reps of everything, so we do another rep of water drinking.
I'm joined, as always, by Kevin Rogers of VegasInsider.com. And if my voice holds out, I thought maybe we could talk a little NBA basketball. How you doing, Kevin?
Derek, I'm doing well. It's a fun time of year, even though we don't have any football right now. Still a lot of excitement with both the NBA and NHL playoffs going on.
The one thing I've noticed about the NBA playoffs, and I've seen this before, is that you get all these blowout games, thinking specifically Dallas and Oklahoma City, and then the team reverses the blowout. What do you make of the NBA playoffs? Is it a little bit more difficult to handicap than other sports?
Well, it's different from this standpoint that you throw out all of the scheduling advantages that you would have in the regular season, where you see teams on a back-to-back or 3 and 4 nights or coming back from a road trip, whatever the case may be, that all that's thrown out. So the problem is that you don't have any of those to go to, and also you keep playing the same team over and over again. So that doesn't mean necessarily that you can't win at it. It just means that some of those edges that you would develop in the regular season are now gone. So now you got to kind of start over again, and there's the popular zigzag theory, which really hasn't worked out that well so far in this postseason. Basically, people don't know what the zigzag theory is. You're basically alternating teams through a series. So let's just say Indiana beats Toronto in game 1 of their series. Indiana was a 7-point underdog, you would take Toronto the next game, and Toronto ended up covering in Game 2. So then you would think, okay, you go back to Indiana, and that was developed years ago. I don't really know, if that's totally effective all the time. It seems like it may be, but you mentioned Dallas, Oklahoma City. Now, I made the foolish mistake of I took Oklahoma City in Game 1, easy blowout. I took them again in Game 2 simply on eye test, and that was a mistake. That Dallas, for as bad as, this is the way I kind of look at these blowouts, for as bad as Dallas played, that they were going to come back, and they were going to play better in Game 2, that Oklahoma City wasn't going to keep it up, and Dallas ended up not only covering, but they won the game outright. So, you would think that that would be the case in these playoff games, no matter how well you play in one game, that it's going to come back. But on the flip side, Miami shot lights out in 2 games against Charlotte, and Memphis, who is just a broken team right now with all their injuries, they've been blown out twice by San Antonio. And, you look at Atlanta, they had a close game against Boston in Game 1, and then they opened it up and they won Game 2 convincingly. So there's no true system to it, but I think if you pay attention to the way these games go, I think as we move forward in the playoffs and we get a little bit more even matchups, that you could probably take advantage of. If a team plays well in one game, they may fall back to earth in the next game.
How do you establish a fair value point line, though, Kevin? Because you mentioned taking Oklahoma City in the second game. Well, they got blown out by 38 points in the first game. So even if you factor an improvement, what did they get beat by? 14. The line was 14. How do you factor that in? I noticed tonight Dallas at home is an 8.5-point underdog.
Well, we don't really see a lot of changes when the game stays in the same venue. That you go through some of these early games, like Miami was a 4.5-point favorite in Game 1 against Charlotte. They shot lights out. They won by 30-something points, and they were only a 5-point favorite in Game 2. So there wasn't much of a change in a lot of them. I think the only one maybe was San Antonio got bumped up a few points against Memphis, but again, because Memphis is not even a playoff team right now. But now that you're going on the road, I think there are times you can find value on the road, because even though they try to even it out by the number dropping, but of course the home team not getting the points for the home court advantage, that I think with Toronto, let's just say Toronto's playing Indiana tonight, and I like Toronto actually laying 1.5 against the Pacers. That I think you can sometimes find the value there with those teams, because I think a lot of people want to buy into, like with Dallas, for instance. Oh, they just beat Oklahoma City. Now look at all the points they're getting. I got to take them with the points. But maybe that's not the best value in the world. I sometimes think that you find better value at times, maybe not in this playoff, but you find better value trying to grab a road dog. I think almost the road teams may have more value at times than necessarily a home dog, because you get home dogs in the playoffs, that means that the other team just outclasses you. That's just what it is. That you rarely see a lot of home dogs have success in the NBA playoffs. Very few and far between. But you look at these games tonight, and you have 3 road teams favored. I would be shocked if all 3 home teams covered. I just don't think that would happen. And that's where I think people fall into a trap sometimes, that you got to be selective with your home dogs and try to find the right situation where, if a team is down 2-0, I maybe feel a little bit better about them than maybe the 1-1 with Oklahoma City, where now they're a little more motivated. That's the difference. That Golden State against Houston, granted Steph Curry may not play, but Golden State can go in knowing, all right, we lose, it's no big deal. Where Oklahoma City can't fall down 2-1 to Dallas. So I think there may be some more motivation with the Thunder after the way they played the other night, as opposed to maybe like a Golden State.
The one thing you always see at this time of year is the defense really starts to clamp down. Speaking again of Dallas, Oklahoma City, Dallas shooting 36%. Is that something you can look at and use as a handicapping factor? A team shooting, obviously Golden State is just the opposite phenomenon, where they've always been a great shooting team. Does that factor into the handicapping, or is that all just, part of looking at the game overall?
Well, it just because you were mentioning Dallas, that one thing to note about them is that they were a team that was scoring a lot of points, that was playing more of an up-tempo game for most of the season. When the Mavericks came down the stretch and they were fighting for one of the final playoff spots in the West, it seemed like Rick Carlisle changed things around, and was playing more of a slow-down pace. And you saw in the final, I think, 8 games of the regular season where the Mavs, I believe, won 6 of them to get in the playoffs. They were winning games, scoring 80-something, 90-something points. They weren't even breaking 100, but their opponents were scoring in the 80s, that they just slowed it down. And obviously, Game 1, it didn't work out against Oklahoma City, but look what happened in Game 2. That Kevin Durant took 33 shots and missed 26 of them. Russell Westbrook didn't play very efficiently on the offensive end, and Dallas just said, you know what? If we're going to make it in these playoffs, we got to slow things down, and we're not going to let these teams like Oklahoma City that can score a bunch of points with 2 dynamic scorers, we're not going to allow them to do that. So Dallas tried to slow it down, and granted, their numbers offensively are going to be uglier, but at least on the defensive side, you saw how Oklahoma City was a bit frustrated, and it'll be interesting moving forward in the series to see if that trend keeps up, that Dallas, if they're going to control the tempo and play low-scoring games, or Oklahoma City is going to get it back going again, and they're going to start playing like they did in Game 1.
See anything tonight that you like, Kevin? We've got Dallas, as I mentioned, an 8.5-point underdog at home. Houston also at home, a 5-point underdog. And Indiana at home, a 1.5-point underdog.
I like the Raptors tonight against the Pacers. The Raptors won Game 2 at home. Now they go on the road. And, you know, the Raptors haven't had a lot of playoff success in their history, and they were swept by the Wizards last year in the opening round. And, you know, now them as a 2 seed playing Indiana, who has playoff experience. So this isn't, you know, a new team to the playoffs. But, you know, at the same time, I don't like, and you know this, Derek, you can't play the do factor. You cannot say this player or this team is due.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work that way. But with that being said, with Toronto's backcourt, DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry, they have not shot the ball well through the first 2 games. And I do believe that, and this is always an old handicapping, I don't want to say a trick, but at least a theory of mine, that when you leave a situation, even if it's, you know, you're playing at home, you're not playing too well. I think when you go on the road, you play a little looser maybe, because now you're not in front of the home fans, and I think we'll see better performances from DeRozan and Lowry tonight. And you look at the middle with Toronto with this Valanciunas, who has 34 rebounds so far. He's been an absolute monster in the first 2 games for the Raptors, and Indiana really isn't that great on the inside. This Indiana team, past Paul George, who has had 2 really good games, and he's obviously an upper-tier player in the league, there's not a lot there in the Pacers that really intimidates you. And I think now, like I talked about earlier with the value, Toronto laying 1.5 is basically in a pick-em spot against the Pacers tonight. And I think after the first 2 games, you saw them laying 7 and you saw them laying 8, where now they got their first win, and now, you know, there isn't pressure on them necessarily, as opposed to if they were down 2-0. I just think that they can come in tonight in basically a pick-em spot, and hope that if Lowry and DeRozan can have better games, I think that they cruise and they win this game easily. And you know what? In almost a pick 'em spot, I think this is the best value of the night.
Very good. Always appreciated, Kevin, and we'll talk again next week.
Okay, Derek, thank you.